Anyone who knows me or has even been watching this YouTube channel for any length of time knows how much I love Tesla's full self-driving and what they're trying to do. But there is one issue that I feel Tesla could solve relatively quickly, and yet they're not doing it: the speed limits. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. First of all, a huge thank you to Zenly Music, who is my son, for doing the new music for the intro, and for Anthony Soto for doing the new graphics. It's been way too long, but these two have gotten together and created a really nice new intro for me. Let me know what you think in the comments, and of course, check out both of their Instagrams, websites, etc. if you're interested in work from them yourself. All right, so when I talk about speed limits, what am I talking about? Obviously, Tesla is able to use speed limits because the car generally drives the speed limit that is posted for most roads. So you may think to yourself, yeah, everything works great and that's all good. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is there are lots and lots of issues where there are particular speed limit signs that the car always refuses to read. And there are also speed limit signs where the car is on a road and doesn't see a speed limit sign and defaults to the wrong speed limit until it sees the sign, and then it actually updates itself. So first I want to hypothesize just a bit about the reason why this might be the case, and then talk about the obvious solution to this and actually ask the question of why Tesla hasn't done this already. So again, this first part is speculation on my part, but what I think actually happened with Tesla was at some point in the past, I mean, we could be talking about 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, they decided it would be really cool if they could train a neural network to read speed limit signs. And so the neural network, they're like, okay, can you look at a whole bunch of 25-mile-an-hour speed limit signs and 55-mile-an-hour speed limit signs and tell the difference between them? And it turned out that the neural network was actually really good at this. And they were like, oh, that's really cool. Let's go ahead and embed it into our code. So that all sounds well and good. What would the issues with this be? The issues would be, number one, that if you have a speed limit sign that it hasn't trained on, it's not going to know it. I know for a fact I drive by 15-mile-an-hour speed limit signs in the sort of loop that goes around the mall, which I kind of take as a back road to cheat and get from my house to work without having to drive through like 3 major traffic intersections. So I use that all the time, and the speed limit sign is completely ignored by Tesla. It just drives right past it, and it's like, nope, it doesn't exist. So you see that a lot. You can also see many of the signs that are those kind of digital signs that are often like they change the speed limits depending on conditions. The car doesn't see that. I've talked to friends like Mars Embassy who has a lot of issues with that. He drives down in South Texas and the car doesn't see a lot of speed limit signs. And the big reason for this is that, as far as I understand it, this is just a neural network that recognizes speed limit signs. It's not an optical character recognition thing. In other words, it's not looking around and reading text. It's not going like, does that say 1 and 5 and that's a 15 and therefore it's a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit? It's literally matching images. So if you put in the training set a bunch of 2 5s with the white sign with the black border, the neural networks will figure out that that's class 25-mile-an-hour speed limit sign, put it into that category, and then tell the car that that's the speed it should be going. So the policy is being dictated by a neural network that's kind of an all or nothing neural network. It's probably got things for the United States like 25, 35, 40, 45, 55, 65, 70, 75, and maybe 80, something like that. So it's probably got like 10-ish classes that it can dump these things into. And if it doesn't fit into one of those classes, and again, historically, maybe what they did was they just decided on those classes, and it's a pain in the ass to go back and retrain this thing with other weird speed limit signs like 19 or 15 or things like that. But because of that, if it doesn't recognize the speed limit sign, it's as if it doesn't exist. It's not like a human being looking at something and ignoring it. It's like literally this thing doesn't exist. So that's a significant problem. And then, of course, the other aspect of the problem is, and this happens to me every day also, so I get to see both of these every single day as I leave my neighborhood. I leave the neighborhood and the road itself is a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit, but the speed limit sign is pretty far down. It's maybe, I don't know, half a mile down the road or something, not quite that far, third of a mile down the road maybe. But anyway, I have to drive to the speed limit sign before the car recognizes that as a 50-mile-an-hour area, and it defaults to 25. And of course, when you're pulling out on a road where people are driving 50 and you're going 25, that is a bad thing. And of course, there's always that situation where a truck gets right in front of the speed limit sign as you're passing or something, and it blocks the speed limit sign. And so the Tesla doesn't realize that the speed limit has changed, and it keeps on going about its merry way, thinking that the speed limit was the old speed limit. So that's another significant challenge with building your speed limit policy for your car based on neural networks only, as opposed to optical character recognition, or the other thing that I'm going to talk about in just a second. So again, why would this still be in the code for making decisions about speed limits for Tesla? Well, number one, it works pretty well in most circumstances, so that works out well. But number two, I have a feeling that even at Tesla, where they're, always moving very quickly, this is just some legacy code that's in there. It's a legacy neural network that nobody's really touched in a long time. It works fine. They're just like, we're working on other stuff. We don't need to deal with this. But I will tell you that even though they might think that it's working fine and it's not a problem, it is a problem. And it's not just me. I wanted to make sure, so I kind of polled other people. There's a lot of speed limit sign issues. There's also the issue where the car doesn't slow down rapidly enough when you go from like a 45 to a 35 zone, and the car needs to slow down because it needs to not be going 45 anymore when it hits the 35, because if a police officer is there, you could easily get a ticket. So that's a circumstance that the car really needs to work on as well. And by reading the speed limit sign as you pass it, it really can't react to it early enough to make the decision to slow down quickly enough so that you couldn't necessarily get a ticket. And then, of course, if we expand to the rest of the world, every single country has its own speed limit signs and their own, ways of doing it and putting it in different, circles as opposed to squares, and whether it's kilometers per hour or miles per hour, things like that. So if you start thinking about this neural network, this legacy neural network, again, I'm assuming this, I don't know this for sure, but if you think about this legacy neural network, it's now going to have a whole new list of categories. Now, obviously, you would do it per country. So, if you're in France, you would do it based on the French speed limit signs and the categories they have. But what if this French categories, if the US ones are like 10, and so that's what they've got, and there's like 15 normally used ones in France, then you've got an issue because you now have to like recategorize, and all of this stuff has to be redone. And of course, we've already got an example of this in Canada where the speed limit signs are in kilometers per hour, they look different, etc. So anyway, this is all not insurmountable stuff, but there's a so much easier solution. And that is that, as far as I understand it, Tesla takes their map data from Google. They get Google Maps. And guess what? Google Maps has pretty much every segment of normal road. It has speed limits already defined for that segment of road. So it seems a little bit obstinate on Tesla's part, in fact, a lot obstinate on Tesla's part, that they don't default to the Google Maps speed limit. So in other words, I pull out of my neighborhood onto that 50-mile-an-hour road, and it already knows it's 50. Or if I'm coming up on an area that's going from 45 to 35, it already knows that up ahead in a half a mile or something, it's going to be 35. And so it can begin to slow down so it can match that speed as you get to the point where it turns to 35. And then, of course, the Tesla can read the speed limit signs, and if it sees one that's contrary to what the Google Maps information is, it can then supersede that by putting that speed limit on. That would be a situation like with the digital speed limits or something, where they're changed all the time based on the conditions of traffic and weather, etc., that it could read that. So it knows it's like 65 miles an hour normally, but it's kind of a crappy day and the traffic is bad and it's 55 right now. And so as it gets up to that, it can see that it's 55 and it can change that. So what you would do is you would default to the Google Maps speed limit because it's very, very accurate. Most of the time, it knows what's going on, right? I use Waze. I used to use it a lot more before I had my Tesla, but for years I've used Waze, and it knows what the speed limits are pretty much all the time. And so therefore what you would do is have the Tesla drive according to that, unless it sees a speed limit sign that supersedes that. So if it comes across something that's different, then it changes. So you can still make use of this neural network that's figuring out speed limits, but you wouldn't default to that. And for people who don't drive with full self-driving beta, or they enhance navigate on autopilot on the highways, you may think this isn't that big a deal, but it really, really is. It creates a lot of situations where you're driving the wrong speed. You're either going too fast for a situation or too slow for a situation. And it becomes kind of dangerous, or potentially, again, you could get a ticket from a police officer because you're not driving the right speed in a certain zone. So this is a kind of a big deal, and it's something that Tesla really needs to address. Again, I know they have a lot bigger fish to fry, and this is kind of not a sexy thing to do, right? I'm sure the engineers want to work on more sexy projects, and this is kind of dull and boring, but it doesn't also seem like it would be that difficult to update the policy to default to Google Maps and then override that if it sees a speed limit sign that disagrees with that. So Tesla, consider me a representative of a lot of your users and consider this an open letter, a request to expend some time and effort to update the policy network so that it actually defaults to the map speed limit and then only overrides that if it sees a sign that's different from what the map's data has. If you do this, you will have an awful lot of very happy customers, so thank you so much in advance. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it fun and interesting and thought-provoking. If you did, please do like it so other people can find it, and of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon. I really do appreciate everything you do. The support is fantastic. The conversations are great too. And of course, if you want to join the team, just check out the link in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have Tesla Bot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, Success is a Possible Outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on. So check it out. And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Thank you. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a solar roof, a power wall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.